Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, February 10th, 2022. This meeting is being convened electronically pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.021 subdivision 1 due to the determination that because of the pandemic, it is not prudent or feasible for us to meet in our usual place of business. We are complying with all applicable portions of the open meeting law, and all votes will be taken by roll call. Beginning then with attendance. Manager Hejmati.
Present.
Manager Loftus.
Here.
Manager Maxwell.
Here.
Manager Miller.
Here.
Manager Olson.
Here.
Manager Sando.
Here.
Manager White is here. Everyone is in attendance, and we certainly do have a quorum. Are there any members of the public here, Mr. Whisker, who would want to speak to us?
There are not.
Thank you. Then the next item of business is to have the agenda approved. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Is there a second?
Hejmati, second.
Thank you, Manager Hejmati. Voting then on approving the agenda. Manager Sando.
Yes.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager White votes aye. 7 votes. The agenda is approved. Under information items this evening, we have the fourth quarter 2021 financial report from Ms. Johnson. On the consent agenda, we have approval of the January 27th, 2022 board meeting minutes and one consent item resolution, which is 22006, acceptance of the tort liability limits on the district's insurance policy renewal. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Sando approves.
I'll take the motion from Manager Miller and a second for Manager Sando. Then voting on the consent agenda, Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Sando.
Aye.
Manager White votes aye. 7-0. The consent agenda is approved. Just a brief note from my report. Since the last meeting, Mr. Whisker and I have met with Commissioners Fernando and Gotel, and tomorrow morning we'll be meeting with Commissioner Conley, or tomorrow afternoon, which will finish our round of annual meetings with all 7 Hennepin County Commissioners. And the legislative meeting for MAUD is the middle of February. I think the registration materials are out. Then Operations and Programs Committee report, Manager Loftus.
Thank you, President White. This evening, the Operations Committee met to continue our series of discussions on the climate action framework. Talked about, we have talked about both adaptation and now mitigation as well. And staff has done great work on helping us clarify our role and how we might address climate issues in the future. And our next of the series of discussions will happen in March. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. That was a great discussion we had. Thanks to staff and managers. Upcoming meetings are listed in the agenda. We have committee and board meetings in the usual times in February 24th and March 10th. And Manager Olson is liaison for the March 16th as Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. Are there any other meetings or events managers would like to mention before I move on? Then going to our first action item 11.1, which is resolution 22007, Ms. Domyancic Lee.
Thank you, President White, managers. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Wonderful. This evening, staff is seeking authorization to solicit bids for construction of the 6 Mill Marsh Prairie Trail and Interpretation. The Trail and Interpretation project is the second phase of a 2012 capital project that restored the land of 2 former farmsteads to tallgrass prairie and several small wetlands. The planned trail would provide formalized public access to about 1/3 of the property, and site interpretation would allow visitors to more closely engage with prairie habitat, of which only about 1% remains in the state. The site is within the watershed of 6 Mile Creek, one of our 2 focal geographies, and sits just about 1.5 miles upstream from Halstead Bay of Lake Minnetonka. As the managers are aware, the solicitation will be a rebid following a poor bid outcome in October of 2021. At that time, the 2 submitted bids were rejected, and the board directed staff to refine bid documents and then inform the board when bid conditions improved. As staff worked with the design team from Dave & Farber to analyze the original bid package, a number of factors that may have led to increased bids came to light. And those include the design complexity of certain interpretive elements, the lack of specificity related to some regulatory and technical requirements, the use of a lump sum bid format that possibly contributed to higher cost contingencies, and a very challenging bid climate given material costs and labor shortages. So as a result, staff worked with the design team to make some specific adjustments to the bid package that might return more competitive bids from a larger number of bidders, and I'll step through those adjustments now. First, based on some follow-up conversations with the 2 bidders, Dave & Farber closely examined the design complexity of the 4 interpretive pieces. The design of the transect element in particular was edited. The transect, which is shown here, is the short trail section that crosses the main trail at the highest point on the site and uses ground level steel plates to interpret the landscape and lead trail users sort of out into the prairie about 15 feet in either direction from the main trail. The design team determined that the original design, which called for 5-foot deep poured footings for the individual steel plates, was really somewhat over-engineered, and they revised the design instead to have the steel plates, shown here in brown, set into several long sections of poured concrete instead. So essentially the 9 steel plates will be affixed to sections of poured slabs. And then at each end of the transect will be the view shed panels, which is shown here on the right. The panels function essentially as traditional interpretive signage with text calling out the various habitats that can be seen from this high point on the site. But the panels also frame a significant line of sight in each direction in which the prairie landscape, pocket wetlands, and other features in the distance can be seen. Second, staff also learned that the 2 bids included significant budgets to acquire project permits and contract for soil geotechnical testing and confined space entry. The original project specifications stated very minimal needs in these areas, but to remove any ambiguity about these requirements, specifications were rewritten to detail precisely that the contractor only needs to provide a very simple stormwater pollution prevention permit from the Mpca, and that no geotechnical testing or confined space entry is needed for the project. Third, the use of a lump sum bid, while it is simpler from a project design standpoint, does not require a bidder to provide a detailed accounting of specific materials and labor in their bid. And this can result in increased contingencies, which protect the bidder from unforeseen costs, but can also really greatly inflate the bids. A change with this second solicitation will be to use a line item bid format that requires the bidder to assign individual costs to operations and specific materials at set quantities. And these individual costs then must total the submitted bid. And so to then further reduce ambiguity, the operations and materials are also tied to standard MnDOT specifications that contractors are very familiar with. And lastly, the October 2021 bid occurred at a time of year when contractors were just wrapping up their 2021 work and hadn't begun to set their 2022 schedules. Last year was also very challenging with supply chain issues and labor shortages as well. Staff and the design team believe that those 2 compounding factors may have led to both the poor bid response, receiving only 2 bids, and also just the high bids generally. And it's hoped that the timing of this anticipated bid in late winter, a longer bid period of a full month, and some relief in supply chain and labor availability will lead to a better bid response. In addition to these changes, as another means to control costs, the project will again be bid as a base project with several alternates. The primary base bid project elements are the Class 5 surface pedestrian trail with a trailhead sign at each of the trail entrances at Halstead Drive and then at the regional trail connection. The trailhead sign is shown here and includes some general site information, some thought-provoking questions about the landscape, a trail map, and then also guidelines for use of the trail. The remaining base bid items called out with brown icons here are placement of the Class 5 base material for the transect interpretation and constructing the gathering space at the barn. The alternates are the 4 interpretive elements shown in purple here: the transect concrete base, steel steppers, and view shed panels, the interpretive panels that will be affixed to the barn itself, the sky loungers, the sort of netted reclined seats on the far end of the trail, and then the watershed map that will be positioned near the sky loungers. Using decomposed granite instead of Class 5 for the trail surface is also an alternate, as this is really a premium trail material. And then based on return bid prices, the district will be able to select or decline the alternates individually. So with those changes in place, we are prepared to solicit bids tomorrow on February 11th, and then hold a mandatory pre-bid meeting on February 22nd, with a bid opening to follow on March 14th. Staff would seek authorization to enter into a construction contract at the March 24th board meeting, and construction would then be initiated in late March or early April, depending on site conditions. Substantial completion for the project is set for June 30th, with a year of warranty maintenance to follow. And with that, staff requests authorization to solicit bids for the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Trail and construction project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 22-7?
Move approval, Olson.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Is there a second?
Miller seconds.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Are there questions for Ms. Demjanjuk-Lee? Can we have a party on June 30th?
One quick one. Is
Go
there,
ahead.
is there a lot of bids, I mean, a lot of interest in projects in the spring now, or the winter? From different
Manager
contractors?
Maxwell, managers. Yes, we've heard from the district engineer, Chris Meehan, mentioned this week that they've bid some projects recently and they've had good responses, better costs coming in. Chris, maybe you want to speak to that, but I think just in timing in general, as contractors are sort of setting their schedules for the next year, we might see a better bid response.
Good.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Yeah, Manager Maxwell, yeah, we've seen our bids probably come in 10 to 30% below bid, at least through the first part of January and February, especially projects like this that don't have a lot of electrical and mechanical associated with it. So I anticipate you will get much better bids at this time of the season and with the design you currently have. Contractors are definitely trying to fill up their calendar right now, and I think this is a favorable time to bid for this. So
Good, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Hitchmati, did you have your hand up?
I had essentially the same question as Bill. What are the prospects? So
Okay, great.
answered. Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, then let's proceed to voting on adopting this resolution. Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Hajmati,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Miller,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye, 7-0. The resolution is adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President White. Before you turn the floor over to Mr. Heyman, I'd like to share some news with the board if you'd allow me a few minutes to do so.
Please do.
Thank you. I'd like to share with the board that I will be leaving my position at the district to start a new role at the Friends of the Mississippi River as an ecologist. I am certainly one of those people that took some time to reflect on my work life over the last couple of years, and the challenges that have come out of that time prompted me to make a bit of a career change. Although this isn't exactly a career change as much as it is a career return, restoration ecology and education are really my roots, and I'm really looking forward to working more closely with the land and influencing how people interact with it. Most importantly, I want to express my thanks to each of you for your guidance over the last nearly 8 years that I've been with the district. Because of my interactions with the board, I've learned a great deal from your experience and have really refined my communication skills, even learning how to clearly tell a story of my work and considering it from different perspectives. It's just been a really big gift to have been able to have you guide my work and ask the tough questions and be curious and engaged in my work. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm also incredibly thankful for the opportunity to have worked with some completely amazing, talented, smart people during my tenure. Working at the district has really enriched my life, and I'm really lucky to say that I've made some lifelong friends here. So it's been an experience I'll never forget. And so thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that our paths will cross again.
It's been wonderful to have you working for the district, and I certainly remember with great positive feeling the contributions you've made. But when I read the FMR newsletter, look at their wonderful projects, and remember that you came in as a vegetation expert, really, I just think I can understand why you would really, really enjoy moving to that position. But we surely will miss you here.
Me too. Thank you.
Any other comments for managers? Manager Hijmati?
Yes, Laura, I saw what a great job you did in Arden Park. You know, from the beginning to the end, you did a beautiful job on it. And then, you know, at the opening, when you were poised and very present, and, you know, I can see how, you know, doing the education part of it and all of that, as much, I can see how that would be very much your style would be excellent for that. So I'm sure that you will be very successful at what you're going into. And I'm really glad that you took the time to think about what's really important for you. That's what really matters, you know, whether you stay with us or go someplace else. I want you to be happy and satisfied in your life. And so I support you in doing that. And all my energy and thoughts go with you.
Thank you.
I was going to say something, but Arun was so eloquent that I can't match it. But I just wish you a lot of luck, and thank you so much for your hard and good work that you performed for us.
Thank you.
Manager Olson?
I just wanted to say that the I vote I did for the 6 Mile Marsh Prairie Trail was contingent upon Laura seeing it through to the end. That was that was a mandatory expectation, but no, you've brought a level of professionalism to the MCWD that I've respect and appreciate very much. Thank you.
Manager Sando?
Laura, I just want to tell you a great big thanks in your professionalism on working on the Arden Park project. It turned out so well, and even people that were newsayers love it to this day. So thank you, and hope our paths cross again.
Thank you.
We'll try not to send too much water down to you. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
No, just thank you very much, and good luck to you, and hope you enjoy your new job.
Thank you.
Well, what is your last day going to be, Laura?
Will be this coming Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
A few days left.
Well, bon voyage. Thank you very much. Let us move to Resolution 22008. Mr. Heyman.
Well, good evening, Chair White, managers. And before I do jump to 11.2, I knew I would have the floor momentarily to also extend giant thanks to Laura and just say a few words about honestly one of my favorite people in the world. So for the managers that haven't had the opportunity to get to know Laura as a person, she really is the epitome of kind-heartedness and is also a really intelligent, driven, and passionate individual with, I think, a desire to do nothing but leave this place better than she found it. So I think, you know, the board recently joined me in celebrating my first decade with the district, and Laura is one of the people that kept me here. So she and I really grew up together at the district, and after spending 8 years of, I would say, wonderfully crazy times managing some really wild projects, a lot of those things that happen on site that the board doesn't get to see, that's usually where the fun is. And, you know, and she and I have had many of those shared experiences together. And, you know, to all of your points, in those 8 years, we've watched her do some truly remarkable things. She's not only left lasting worldly impacts on the landscape, leading projects in Long Lake Creek, Jennings Bay, 6 Mile Marsh Prairie restoration, and of course, as Manager Sando noted, who could forget picking up Arden Park and delivering, I would say, one of the most amazing projects the organization's ever completed. So she's also really helped me grow as an individual and a professional. So I think our shared challenges, her sage advice, and always steady perspective really have paid dividends for me and I think all staff at the district. So while I am really excited for Laura to find her passion zone once again in vegetation and ecological restoration, I think as an organization, we're really losing an amazing colleague, a cultural icon, and a dear friend. So I just want to congratulate her on the close of one amazing chapter in her story, and of course, offer cheers to the beginning of the next. So best wishes, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Haney.
And with that, I will share my screen. Please let me know if there are any issues. There appear to be already. That should work. Are you all seeing my presentation?
We have it.
Great. Well, as noted, we're before you this evening with action item 11.2, requesting board authorization to amend a contract with Stantec for completion of final environmental investigation at 325 Blake Road. Approval of this amendment will allow commencement of the final steps in our environmental investigation efforts at 325. And before we get to the action, I'll just provide a detailed background of our environmental assessment work to date. Although a lot of that is highlighted in the packet, I think this added context and chronology is helpful for managers, particularly for those that maybe haven't been around for some of the work. So this list is chronological. It's not comprehensive, but I think it gives a pretty good idea of the effort that has gone in on this site thus far. We have received 2 different Hennepin County grants. One was a closeout of assistance grant, which is a COA grant, and the other was an Environmental Response Fund grant. So a total of about $65,000 in investigation funds that we've received from Hennepin County to date. That COA fund, excuse me, helped us to fund and complete the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments. And my apologies for all the acronyms. I will state what they actually are. It's just easier to list the acronyms for space. The COA fund also helped us draft our response action plan, which is the RAP, and the construction contingency plan, which is the CCP. Both of those documents you'll hear throughout the evening, as those are a continued effort that we're undertaking now. Following those, we did receive Mpca review and comment, and that guided our next steps on the site, which included additional groundwater monitoring and an update to that phase 2 environmental site assessment. We completed additional soil sampling during demolition, including test pits where the building was, and some additional groundwater monitoring. And lastly, during this previous cooling season, so in October, we did our first round of soil vapor testing that had been required by the PCA. I will note that there are no soil contamination issues identified on the site above what's considered safe residential value, which is important. That means that reuse is an option for soils on this site. Our development partner is aware of that, and so that's really good news. We did have one location during our soil vapor testing that contained a higher level of benzene than would be allowed. So we'll be testing some additional locations near that hit and really hone in on the potential impact there. And I do have a couple of images I can just show to give you an idea of how extensive our testing has been. The main takeaway is that our partner agencies have really assisted us in completing pretty significant investigation efforts on this site. And because of that, we've been able to communicate through our restoration and redevelopment process that we'll be able to deliver a clean site to the selected developer to the best of our abilities in terms of what PCA language allows. So I'll pull up my laser pointer and just try to give some context for a couple of spots because you'll see some callouts. There were a variety of borings that occurred before we owned the site in 1999 and 2007. Once we owned the site, we conducted a variety of additional borings, monitoring wells, soil vapor testing, and test pits. There were 4 areas in particular we were focused on. This first one, Inset A, was the location of a former underground tank and a transformer spill. That had been tested multiple times before we owned the site and mitigated for, but we did, of course, also conduct soil borings, test pits, and soil vapor within that area, and everything looks to be in good shape there. In set B that you see here, that was also a former underground storage tank. That's what a UST is. And that was tested extensively in 1999 and then mitigated for and also impacted through the road construction, so there aren't additional concerns there. What you've probably heard about in the past as we've talked is there was an off-site petroleum plume that migrated onto our site. That's right by the entrance here, came from the old Oasis market, which is just across Blake Road. And then lastly, we have an area that we've been doing. You can see we did a variety of test pits during demolition to really surround this previous soil boring where we had a aromatic hydrocarbon hit, and everything looks to be in good shape there as well. We were able to delineate and identify that there aren't any additional concerns there. When I mentioned the soil vapor testing that was required by the PCA, we were able to negotiate with them how many that would be. The reason that we had to wait until 2021 was we did need a development plan to actually propose where soil vapor testing would occur. It must occur where residential buildings and commercial buildings will exist. So these are the 20 soil vapor sites. If I overlay that, the blue dots on the actual building pads that Lattice has proposed, you'll see that we have the minimum threshold for each of the locations, including the commercial sites. So the soil vapor testing is comprehensive on the site and will be the second round, which will be during heating season, will be the second and final round that we need to report on. The hit I was talking about with an elevated benzene is down in this southwest corner, which is soil vapor site 16. And so we'll actually conduct, similar to what we had done with the PAH location, we'll do additional vapor tests around this and identify whether mitigation, if levels are at a point where mitigation is necessary or not. I can stop my laser pointer. So the proposed activities to be completed to finish up our investigation is, as I mentioned, this heating season soil vapor testing. We do actually have a driller already on standby and ready to drill on February 17th. They get rather busy, so we book those or at least put them tentatively in advance. So if the board authorizes tonight, we'll be able to move that forward in February and prepare our addendums for the response action plan and the construction contingency plan within the week or two following. It's not a very big lift from my conversations with Michelle at Stantec, and we'll be able to submit that to the PCA by March. And then we do have 5 monitoring wells that we do need to seal. Those are separate from previous environmental grants. We've maintained those for groundwater monitoring for a period of years. The budget, as listed in your packet this evening, it's about $21,591 to complete all of this work. There is just over $6,200 remaining in the Environmental Response Fund grant, which leaves the total remaining cost of $15,390. With contingency, we'd be at just shy of $17,000. And next steps would be to, again, conduct that testing in February, report in March. We'd be able to seal wells early spring, and then May 2022, if mitigation is necessary, for instance, with soil vapor, we could enter the Environmental Response Fund again in May with an application, which we'll be prepared to do and could assist Lattice if they had a need for any sort of vapor barriers. And then lastly, in summer of 22, we expect phase 1 acquisition to occur, the close of the first phase of the property acquisition with Lattice. So with that, the recommended action is for the board to authorize the administrator to execute the contract amendment with Stantec for a not to exceed of $16,930, which is the base remaining plus 10% contingency. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Heeman. Prior to discussion, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Manager Sandel, second.
Manager Sandel seconds. Are there questions for Mr. Heeman? Manager Olson. Manager Olson.
Thank you. When you do the soil vapor testing, are you looking for radon as well?
Manager Olson, we're not testing for radon, although that is a consideration. There are already separate requirements for for development sites like this. So whether they need a passive or active system for radon is already dictated by the building codes within the city. What this does is indicate if there's additional soil vapor beyond what's required for radon, which I believe in Hopkins, and I'd have to double check, is a passive system. Essentially, with this benzene hit, for instance, and what we've been talking about, is it would require an active system, meaning they would have to have a motor of some sort on the top of the building that's drawing air from the pipe network, the pipe gallery that would be below the building. But the system itself is very similar to what would already be required for radon, so it's essentially a modification. And when I do mention the mitigation effort, those systems, to turn those into, whether they're passive or active, they do qualify as expenses through the Environmental Response Fund, so we could assist with grant writing for an active system for vapor mitigation.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have do we know where the benzene comes from?
We do not. Chair White, we've had this conversation, and there's uncertainty with the second round of testing. We're actually going to see if we can hone in on whether it's soil related. There is the potential that it could be coming through the groundwater. So we need to try to resolve that, and that could indicate what sort of mitigation effort would be required, whether we could do a soil removal to mitigate, or if there isn't a clearly identifiable release source, then the mitigation effort or the vapor barrier and active system would be required.
Thank you. For the sake of managers whose tenure is shorter, would you just give us a real quick rundown of the environmental actions that we've taken on this site before? I think of Mercury, first of all.
Certainly, Chair White, manager. So there has been a significant amount of environmental activities on this site. Most of the mitigation efforts actually for the site have been above ground. The biggest ones being with demolition. And during demolition, we had to deal with mercury, which was in the refrigerant system of the industrial facility, as well as ammonia as part of the cooling system. So we had to do a pretty significant removal of the ammonia system, the mercury on site, and then of course the building being constructed in the 40s and 50s was full of asbestos as well. So we did have a significant grant through Metropolitan Council for about $850,000 to help with asbestos removal. The site itself, from an environmental standpoint, below ground, and I should note, we do have a no association determination as well. For the board, what that means is when we acquired the site in 2011, we knew there were some known underground storage tank leaks and other offsite petroleum plumes that had entered the site, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency issued us a no association determination, meaning we were not responsible for those environmental circumstances, but we are responsible as the owner to make sure as we move forward with the site that we mitigate for any of those issues dependent upon future use. So we have that as well, but the site is relatively clean. As I noted, the soil itself is all meets residential values, so the contamination had either been mitigated in the past or was limited in terms of the spills or leaks with underground tanks and the former transformer. So that's in a nutshell the majority of the environmental work we've done to date.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Heyman? If not, we can proceed to vote on adopting the resolution. Manager Hitchmati.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Sando.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye, 7-0. It is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Heyman. Appreciate it. Item 11.3, Ms. Schnoes has resolution 22-009.
Thank you, Chair White. Managers, great to be with you today. Let me get my screen sharing set up. Let's see. Are you seeing that PowerPoint slide?
Yes, we're also seeing the sidebar. There we go.
Okay, we got it.
Yep, it's good.
Okay, let me move this So I can still see you guys. Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm here today to continue our journey forward in the great adventure of finally getting a new website for the watershed district. The task before us tonight is to select a vendor, and we're recommending the firm Love Communications, and authorizing contract for the phase 2 website design and build process. And we've prepared resolution 22009 for your consideration. So just as an overview tonight, I'll cover 3 primary content areas. First, I'll give a brief overview of the project background and its phases. Then I'll review the steps we've taken since I was with you in December to conduct the request for proposal process, including how we made the decision to recommend Love Communications to you this evening. And I'll close with next steps and requesting your selection of the vendor and our ability to move forward, and of course, welcome any questions. So as we all are well aware, the current site is over a decade old, and it's just not meeting the technological needs that we have, much less our communications needs today to tell the story of who we are and what we do, and build the strong partnerships that are essential to advancing our mission. As we embarked on this process in 2018, it was really conceived of in 2 phases. The first phase was completed in 2020 through the development of a content strategy that serves as a vision and roadmap, and always anticipated a phase 2 would follow that would do the actual design and build of the site itself to bring that vision to a reality. Since kind of adopting phase 1, we learned in the fall that the security support for our current website, because its technology is so old, would be ending. And so in November 22, which has prompted us to really look to October of this year as our launch date for the new website. The goals and principles of how we want to see this new website come to vision and how we want to manage it have been established through this process, and we carry those forward as we move into phase 2. Phase 2 is scope. We've defined 8 core tasks in the RFP, but really those tasks can be split into 3 core areas. First, it's honing the vision. So reviewing what we did in phase 1 and really doing very thoughtful prioritization of what is most essential for October 2022. So we don't get distracted by kind of extraneous or extras that might take us off that target date. Once we have all that in place, then we focus on creating the website, doing the design work, doing the content creation, doing the coding to design and build it so it can come to life. Launching is not a simple task. It includes rigorous testing of the site to make sure its function, security features, and all are up to industry standards and performing well as training staff. So we are well equipped to manage it going forward, because we know we don't want this site to just be a one and done. In particular, we're really going into this with a focus of getting everything we need in the foundation of the site, but also carefully planning for future enhancement projects so we continue expanding how we're visualizing our data, how we're telling impactful stories of our projects for years to come. And we want to kind of have that roadmap completed for us before we conclude this phase 2 process. Overall, we set a budget of between $80,000 and $100,000 to complete that scope. As may be familiar, but a helpful reminder, this website approach that we're taking is going to be a really powerful complement to the IT investments we've already made. So we're really thinking about how the different technological assets of each program is getting integrated in our GIS mapping system. And then the website is kind of the shopping window, the hub for all that data and content and stories that we'll share with partners and policymakers and the general public. I shared this timeline of phase 2 with you in December, and it's exciting to kind of be halfway through it now through the work we've done in the subsequent time. And we're really poised to move from that vendor recruitment into the project initiation. By as late as March, we will be kicking off the phase 2 efforts, and possibly sooner, since we were able to hit this February 10th meeting this month. Again, all of that's going to lead to a new site in October. Now I'm going to talk you through that work we've done between December and now. Following your approval of the RFP in December, we released the proposal virtually through our website, as well as partner sites where it's common for vendors to look for opportunities for contracts. The RFP laid out our process, which included a required letter of support or letter of interest to see who's considering submitting and to receive their questions so we could provide comprehensive aggregated answers to everyone who submitted a letter. We received 19 letters, and of those who reviewed our information and thought further about our project, 12 submitted proposals. Myself and several other staff did an initial review of those 12 and narrowed it to a cohort of 5 finalists who we invited to participate in an interview process, and we held those interviews last week. The 5 finalists were named in your board materials and are listed here on the website. They're a mix of small and mid-sized firms, some located here locally, others coming from other states across the country. Of important note, one of the finalists was Vendy. They're the firm that we did select in phase 1, who led the content strategy development. The interview team was a robust mix of staff with expertise across our programming areas and key strategic and technical perspectives for what we really need in a website, both from the back end experience as well as the front end user experience, such as our permitting portal. Graciously, Manager Olson supplied his time and was a participant in every interview and every interview debrief, and his perspective was much valued and appreciated as we went through this process. The interviews were all conducted with a set structure, principally organized around a presentation we requested of them, in which they answered the question how they would lead this project to create the website we need by October 2022. So we really wanted to hone in on their specific approach, how they would help us do the proper prioritization, and how they would execute project management to keep us on track while being collaborative and creative and kind of helping us get beyond what we know to do ourselves. We did have a series of criteria as described in this table that was included in the RFP, and that helped us both evaluate the full set of 12 proposals to narrow to our finalists, as well as go from those 5 finalists to our 1 recommendation tonight. The weighted amounts you see here were provided as a point of reference, but not set as a deterministic factor. So they were just guidance as we weighed kind of our overall judgment about what would be best for the needs of the district. After the interviews, the panel considered a number of factors, and I'm pleased to say, you aren't the only ones who are having fun using Mentimeter as a pre-survey tool to help inform quality discussions. We used it as well to assess the strengths, areas of concern, how each of the vendors in the finalist pool were performing across these 4 areas of criteria, and also a kind of each individual interview panel member ranked the total 5 to see who they thought was kind of coming out on top after that 5 process. All of those results were aggregated together, much as you all enjoyed in the climate conversation earlier today, and really inspired a very productive briefing with the administrator as well as Manager Olson that led to a consensus decision, which I am sharing with you tonight. Cost is obviously an important factor to us, as well as how the firms were thinking about the balance of focus in their projects. So here we broke down the budget proposals from each vendor across the various areas of work and required tasks to complete it. You can see that it's not the same breakdown for each firm. So first of all, in the design category, so the look of the site, we saw Spectrum Media Solutions and Vendy putting a disproportionate amount of emphasis on design compared to the other vendors. Alternatively, Software for Good and Vendy put a lot of focus on development, the coding, the back-end technical, the data visualizations. And then finally, two vendors, Room 34, who was applying with a design firm named Background Stories, as well as Love Communications, had the greatest emphasis on the content itself, the words, the photos, the stories that we're wanting to tell through the technology and design of the site. Importantly, we, in our budgeting for the website process, wanted both the technology and the content creation. First of all, we know our website is important as a story delivery tool. We also know that the outreach program has been going through a lot of staff transition and doesn't have a lot of capacity to lead that work internally. And so we really, after weighing all these different considerations, narrowed our decision-making to those firms that could best deliver the content we need while providing the technical skills and design expertise we're also looking for. From that finalization, we are bringing to you the selection of Love Communications. They are a firm we didn't know about before this process, but really kind of wowed us from first getting their proposal sent, and was a great and very enjoyable interview conversation that we had. They're a full service design agency out of Salt Lake City, Utah. So while we're water rich, they know the value of water from a different ecological context. As you see in this word cloud here, where staff generated the words they thought best spoke to the strengths of the firm, we really thought they were thoughtful, brought deep expertise, but were also creative, lighthearted, and had the best sense of really getting what we're looking for and responding to what we need in the right way. They talk in their design thinking process about, let me just get this right, building the right project in the right way. So defining what we want to do and then going about doing it. And when we ask them about risk, they nailed it on the head about how we don't want to just do what makes sense from how our programs are organized or from what's good for staff, but always have the end user in mind, always have the simplest, most effective communication in mind through what we're really creating in the website. Their budget came in just under the top of 100,000. And in our conversation, both in the interview and subsequently in some chats, we found that they're really flexible in adjusting the allocation of resources within that 98,000 to best suit our needs. And one thing we have determined in part is, while we were looking for photography through this contract, we're actually going to hold it out and plan to do that separately on our own, still within the overall scope we were anticipating of investing in the website, and they're going to put even more of their time into the writing, the infographics, and that content that's really going to make our website shine. In addition to those assets, staff that were on the interview team really wanted me to emphasize how impressed we were with the demonstration of their skills through previous work. So with the Salt Lake City International Airport, they are displaying critical real-time information to the public about flight arrivals and wait times and things like that, working both with the airport's own data as well as external partner data. They also had an example with a city in Utah that had a very user-friendly government site and had some of those key interactive services that we know will be important, such as permitting. And then we were quite wowed. As part of a follow-up to the interview, what you see here is just a screenshot of a live interactive web page they made within a 3-hour exercise, unprompted by us, showing a decade of our water level data in such a way that you could zoom in and zoom out to kind of go from a decade down into 1 year, 1 month. And as your cursor hovered over this blue area, you could pull out and get shown the total water level for a single day. And so we said, well, if they're already seeing how we want to visualize our data just in the interview process, how far will we be able to go with them once we start the project? So if you're excited like us to move forward, our next steps are still this quarter, initiating a contract and leading into project kickoff. Q2 will be really focused on that design and content creation. Then Q3 will take that kind of look and feel we want to have on the outside and develop it through coding and do testing to make sure it's performing well. We will be on track to launch the site in October and initiate the staff training required. And like I said before, we're really doing this with a way of building a strong foundation, but one where we're already thinking ahead to enhancement projects and ongoing maintenance, so we don't get behind on our website as we may have done in recent years. Throughout the process, we welcome and anticipate board engagement. Manager Olson has been a wonderful liaison, and we look forward to continuing our work with him. And in the contracting process, and as of interest tonight or in further conversation, we will outline additional touch points throughout phase 2 with the board, so you have the engagement you want in this really important process. And we already have on the agenda and in our planning with the Citizens Advisory Committee, their continued engagement with the website as well. So with that being said, our request tonight is that you select Love Communications as the vendor and authorize the district administrator to execute a contract for phase 2 website design and build services. And we do have language in there per legal's recommendation that we have a 10% contingency kind of included in that for any amendments or changes that would be necessary. But of course, any such change would follow judicious project management and budgeting conversations as well. So with that, I thank you for the support to get to this point. I welcome your questions and look forward to the discussion.
Move approval of the staff recommendation.
Gosh, I didn't have to ask. Is there a second?
Maxwell second.
Manager Hajmati, I'll take your second. I heard that first. Questions for Ms. Schnoes?
I don't have any questions, but I'm getting sick and tired of complimenting staff on the presentations on subjects that I'm nowhere near as familiar as I should be with, and feel comfortable making a motion to approve it, because that presentation was total and complete, and I really appreciate the work that Helen put into the presentation and the selection process, obviously.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anything else? Manager Olson. And thank you, Manager Olson, for being liaison on this.
Thank you. I'm not going to make any further comment about the recommendation. It's a very strong recommendation. When we started this whole process, and there were as many bidders as there were, getting it down to the last 5 essentially meant that any one of them would have done the job and would have done a good job. So it really became a refinement to see what is the really, what are those differences, what's the best that we could do with those 5 bidders. And I just wanted to say that the contribution from the team, Grace Barlow, Marissa Castro, Brian Beck, and Alex Steele, everybody participated. Everybody, and their interest in the website is unique to their area, and so it was important not to have anybody missing, and but to bring everybody together so that we all communicated well, we got the meetings done on time. That really was Helen's show. She did an outstanding job of making us appear very professional to every one of these vendors. And I was so proud of how we came across and how they stepped up their competence presentation to us. So the idea that we had a good representation, we had effective, complete, and on-time meetings, she would marshal in all those conversations so that everybody would all contribute, but we were on time every single time, and brought in those engagement skills. I just really enjoyed working with Helen, and have yet to meet her in person. But from what I've been able to experience, I'm really glad you're on our CWD staff. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Manager Olson. I'll call on Manager Hitchmati and then Manager Maxwell after that. Go ahead, Manager Hitchmati.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for giving your perspective on it. That's really very, very valuable. I'd agree with Manager Miller, seeing Helen. Thank you. You've clearly done a beautiful job on this. Really appreciate it. Great job, and I'm looking forward to this unfolding. I had a couple of thoughts I wanted to share with you. One thought is, I looked at the proposals, and the one that was software for good had an interesting concept in it that talked about the diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. And I'm hoping that I'm hoping that we can include that in our presentations so that it would work with the evolving demography and the political changes that are coming forward. So thank you. And I see you nodding your head. So clearly you're answering yes already. Thank you. And the second is actually a rather silly thing to say. Was, I was talking to Pat about, and I had read the proposals and what you guys have written and how excited I was about it. And she looked at me and she said, if they want someone to test the website, I would do it because, computer is not my natural language and I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. So, I'll be able to identify all kinds of things for you really quickly. So she offered, volunteered to try it out for you.
Thank you, Andrew Hitchmati. Manager Maxwell.
Oh, no, it was a great presentation. I was fine about it. I was just kind of wondering, because there are in Salt Lake City, do they have an office in the Twin Cities?
Manager Maxwell, no, we would be conducting this through virtual engagement, which I know we've all become quite skilled at going forward. They had some consideration of having their creative director come out as part of some of the photography that was originally included. And in part, given some of the inspiration and excitement we had learning about local photographers in other proposals, that's why we decided, let them think about the whole picture and we'll kind of work offline to get the right images in a coordinated way. But I would anticipate that so we can get the most content creation, coding, and all of that from them, that we may not meet them in person for this project, but that's not a concern that we have, and was a point of discussion among the team, and one where we're comfortable with this final arrangement.
Okay, so they're easily accessible and everything else to us. So
yes, they even made the comment, which maybe suggests kind of their culture and identity, that we can send them content and requests when we leave work, and they will still be working as we are on our way with our afternoon as they are on Mountain Time. So I think we're well suited for good partnerships. And I did have the opportunity of speaking with some of their previous and current clients with the Salt Lake City International Airport and a foundation with Zion National Park, and both had very positive feedback and made me more energized for the collaboration and potential we have with this project.
Okay, and then the second part would be, how about ongoing maintenance? Are they going to be for so long, and then are we going to just take over the maintenance part, or is there a contract involved in that?
Great question. That was something we gathered information about during this process, and there are opportunities at multiple levels in which they could provide ongoing support, from both just kind of, keeping the wheels on to some of these bigger, more creative enhancement projects we're talking about, but we won't be committed to them ongoing. This will be a WordPress site, so it'll be a platform that others have the ability to move forward with should we find another vendor is better going forward. And that's something where we're in close dialogue. Alex Steele is, our IT lead is really providing a lot of guidance in that. So it'll be a question we'll have during the process, but not a decision we need to make at this point. But we know we have options to figure out the arrangement that will be best for us.
All right, as long as we have options to go different directions, anything else, we're good. All right, thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Any comments, any other questions from Ms. Schnoes? Well, then let us move to voting on the resolution 22009. Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
Manager Miller,
Aye.
Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Manager White votes aye, 7-0. The motion, the resolution is adopted. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
Our last item here is the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker.
Back to follow there. 325 Blake Road, just a couple of quick tidbit updates. We do have 60% design trucking along. The design liaisons had a good meeting, a mini charrette with Mike and the design team recently, and the 60% designs are anticipated to come back February 24th. And in parallel, Mike and attorneys and the attorneys for Alatus are workshopping the purchase agreement actively as we speak, excuse me, and that's anticipated to come back in front of the board. The first meeting in March is our target timeline right now. We spoke at our last meeting about the MOD summer tour, made some initial inroads with the MOD executive director, and she's put out some feelers to some agencies, some other watersheds across the state. We're getting some interest in potentially stepping in behind us. So I'll keep you posted on that. Nobody's fully committed at this point, but I've got some promising leads, I guess, is the way that I'd frame it. In terms of the outreach program, been meeting with Helen and team, and we'll be starting the hiring process here for the rest of her team now that she's gotten through the milestone of selecting the website contractor. I think the next big chapter is going to be recruiting and hiring the web/graphic designer and the engagement professional. And now with Laura Damjancic leaving, we'll also be posting a position for planner project manager. So sometime in the next 3.5 months, I think we could expect to see 3 new faces joining the district. On to the Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk. You'll remember that we issued a press release for the Boardwalk. We've got an initial hit on that from Seth Rowe over at Sun Newspapers. So Helen, Mike, myself, Tiffany are coordinating on that, and we'll be closing the loop with that reporter tomorrow. On aquatic invasive species front, I just heard from the DNR that in 2022, they'll be issuing $1.25 million to help manage invasive aquatic plants. And almost 70% of that, around $850,000, is dedicated in the form of one-time grants to lake associations. So you'll recall this is something that's come up in the past in requests from Greenwood and just conversations around the watershed about what our role is. And so just wanted to keep the information flowing there in terms of the level of state funding that's being pushed out this year for that type of work. And that's really it. That rounds out the administrator's report. Sherry and I have been having conversations, and it's been a busy couple of weeks, which is why my performance evaluation wasn't on the docket tonight. But I'll be doing some work alongside Sherry and Lewis to pull together the information so that we can have a robust conversation on the 24th. So I'm giving everybody plenty of warning to have a full dinner, get a good night's sleep, and just otherwise make sure you show up in the most positive, happy mood possible.
That's priming the pump. Any questions for Mr. Whisker? Thank you. Then we are adjourned.
Good
Thanks,
evening.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Sherry, do you want to hang on for just one moment?
I sure will.